Hey guys, what's going on? It's MassiveJoes Thoughts, episode 2. Of course, we're coming to you from MassiveJoes.com. Episode 2, we're going to be talking about carbohydrates. So when we talk about carbohydrates, look, a lot of people have a misunderstanding or have absorbed a lot of misinformation about carbohydrates, and because of that, a lot of people think about carbohydrates as the enemy. They don't really understand that carbohydrates really, if used correctly, can be one of the most powerful tools that you have when it comes to competing as a bodybuilder, competing as a figure competitor, man, competing in pretty much any sport whatsoever. If you have the knowledge to unlock the power of carbohydrates, man, you are in such an awesome position. And look, this is really why we're doing episode 2 on MJ's Thoughts on carbohydrates, is really to try and dispel a lot of the myths about them, remove a lot of the misinformation and misunderstandings that people have about carbohydrates, and really try and drop as many knowledge bombs as we possibly can on you to give you a really good foundation to be able to harness the power of carbohydrates and use them as a tool to help you reach your goals, rather than just viewing them as the enemy and keeping them away from your diet as much as possible. So this video is going to be in 5 parts. I'm going to give you a little bit of science, and then a little bit of anecdotal science as well, aka bro science, aka Joe science. When you're watching my videos, we're calling it Joe science. So there's going to be a blend of both, but it's really going to give you as much good information of carbohydrates as we possibly can. So there's going to be 5 parts. First part, we're going to talk about the different types of carbs. Then we're going to talk about what your body uses carbohydrates for. We're going to talk about the hormone response of carbohydrates, which a lot of people, man, I see people in this industry that have been in this industry for like 10 plus years still don't understand the hormone response associated with ingesting carbohydrates. Then we're going to talk about carbohydrate timing, and then a real quick dash on carbohydrates with bulking, carbohydrates with cutting. Now that's going to be a completely separate video because that's a half-an-hour video in itself, but just gonna just touch on it just a real small bit at the end of this video. So let's get straight into it. Look, part 1 is types of carbohydrates. So you really need to, man, if you're gonna understand anything about carbohydrates, you need to understand the different types of carbohydrates, what they are, and in particular the glycemic index or glycemic response. So there's 3 main types of carbohydrates. There's simple carbs, there's complex carbs, and then there's fiber, which is a complex carb, but it's kind of classed separately to complex carbs because your body can't digest it. So when we talk about the different types of carbs, so simple, complex, and fiber, it really refers to the molecule chain that the carbohydrate is made up of. So the simple carbohydrates are a simple chain or a monosaccharide. Your complex carbohydrates are what we call a polysaccharide, so a complex chain of molecules that make up that carbohydrate. The real practical way to distinguish between carbohydrates is really to look at what we call GI, or glycemic index. Now there has been so much science done on glycemic index over, let's say, the last 50 years that has really shown that the most practical difference between simple and complex carbohydrates is the glycemic index. Now glycemic index, or GI, refers to how quickly your body converts a carbohydrate that you eat or you digest into glucose, which is what your body uses for energy. So glycemic index, or let's call it glucose index because it makes a little bit more sense to call it that, refers to how quickly, if I go and eat myself an Apple iPhone, let's call it an apple, I go and eat that, how quickly does that apple get converted by my body into glucose and get sent into the bloodstream? So glycemic index, when we talk about high GI or high glycemic index, it means that it happens real quickly. So from when you eat to when you get glucose response in your bloodstream, real fast. When we talk about complex carbohydrates, they're also known as low GI carbs. The process is significantly slower. So from when you eat the carbohydrate to when you get glucose in the bloodstream is a slower process. So high GI carbs, real quick conversion to glucose. Low GI carbs, slightly slower conversion to glucose. Then you've got fiber. Now, fiber your body can't digest, so fiber is actually quite useful in digestive health, so gastrointestinal health and making sure that your body is able to digest what you eat. But fiber doesn't have a glycemic index because your body can't digest fiber. So the three main types of carbohydrates, let's go through them again. Simple, which is high GI, complex, which is low GI, and then fiber, which doesn't have a glycemic index because your body can't digest it. Now, when we talk about whole food sources of these carbohydrates, you know, what whole foods are simple carbs, what whole foods are complex carbs, and what whole foods are fibrous carbs. Look, simple carbohydrates tend to be any whole food that is sweet to taste. So you're talking about your apples, your Apple iPhones, you're talking about your fruits, you're talking about your fruit juices, you're talking about most types of dairy that have a carbohydrate content tend to be simple carbohydrates. On the other hand, when you talk about complex or low GI carbohydrates, those are pretty much every other type of carbohydrate. So you're talking about your rices, you're talking about your grains in certain cases, you're talking about your potatoes, you're talking about your breads, you're talking about your pastas, your rices, your couscouses, your quinoas. Man, those are your complex carbs or your low GI carbs. Those are the whole food sources. And then finally, when we talk about fiber, man, the easiest one is green vegetables. So your broccolis, your lettuce, your celeries tend to be really good sources of fibrous carbohydrates. So those are the three types of carbs, a little bit on glycemic index as well, and then the whole food sources of those carbohydrates. I give myself some aminos, help me stay anabolic. No carbs in that at all. So then the next thing we're going to talk about is uses of carbohydrates, all right? So we know the different types of carbs. What does your body actually use carbohydrates for? Look, carbohydrate, really, really important to understand, man. Carbohydrates are your body's most efficient source of energy. So your body uses carbohydrates for energy, man. That is the main purpose of carbohydrates. Your body can't repair muscle tissue from carbohydrates. It doesn't assist in anything else that your body does. It's just used for energy. It's an energy source. That is the primary role of carbohydrates in the human body. So with that in mind, the three main things that your body will do with carbs. So you take your Apple iPhone, you eat your apple, gets converted into glucose. High GI gets converted into glucose quite quickly. Your body will, A, burn that glucose for energy straight away in the bloodstream, burn it. So it gets used as energy straight away. If it doesn't do that, if you don't have use for it, your body will B, will convert that glucose into glycogen and store that glycogen in muscle tissue and a little bit in your liver as well for easily accessible energy at a later date when you need it. So burn glucose as energy, or if you don't have a use for it, convert it into glycogen, store it in muscle tissue, store it in your liver for quick access energy later on. If you don't burn the glucose for energy and your glycogen receptors in your muscles and your liver are completely full, so there's no more room to store any more glycogen, your body will take that glucose, that glycogen, convert it into triglycerides and store it as body fat through a process called de novo lipogenesis. Big scientific word, man. All it means is convert carbohydrates into fat, store it as body fat. That is the third thing that your body will do with carbohydrates. And that's where a lot of this misinformation comes about. Man, mainly perpetuated by the media. So the media say, eat too many carbs or eat carbs at night, or just eat too much carbs and you get fat because your body converts carbs into fat. Yes, to a certain extent it is true, but it's the third priority that your body has for using carbohydrates. It won't just take carbs and convert them into fat. It just doesn't happen like that. If your body, it first will burn it for glucose. If it doesn't burn it for glucose, it will store it as glycogen. If your glycogen receptors are full, the third and last thing your body will do with carbs, convert them into triglycerides, store them as body fat for energy use later. So it is the third thing that your body does. But man, just make sure you understand that it is the last priority that your body will use carbohydrates for. So those are the three uses of carbohydrates, man. it is really important to understand that carbs are primarily a source of energy. And when we talk a little bit later on about where carbs fit in bulking, we're just going to touch on what we call gluconeogenesis. And even when we talk about cutting, we're going to talk about lipolysis as well. This is where your body doesn't have carbohydrates and it needs to secure energy from a different source. So gluconeogenesis, just real quick, is when your body will convert certain amino acids or certain proteins into glycogen for energy. And then lipolysis is when your body converts stored body fat or lipids into glucose and burns those for energy as well. So carbohydrates are primarily an energy source. Your body will burn them as an energy source or store them as glycogen, or if they can't be burnt as an energy source and they can't be stored as glycogen, convert them into fat, store them as body fat. That's the three things your body uses carbohydrates for. Now, the most important part of this video, man, if you don't listen to a word I say in this video other than this is possibly the biggest knowledge bomb I can drop on you in this video. Hormone response when it comes to carbohydrates. And look, there is so much misunderstanding or just non-understanding of hormone response when it comes to carbohydrates in the industry at the moment. It just blows my mind. It completely blows my mind. There's a few things that kind of have had a lot to do with that. In particular, a few crazes going on at the moment. Intermittent fasting and if it fits your macros completely disregard hormone response when it comes to carbohydrates. Look, the main thing to understand with hormone response and carbohydrates is insulin. The hormone insulin. So your body, in the pancreas of your body, whenever you ingest carbohydrates, and those carbohydrates get converted into glucose. Glucose is also known as blood sugar. Your blood sugar levels rise. Your body or your pancreas secretes this hormone called insulin, and insulin, its primary role is to bring your blood sugar levels back down. How does it do that? How does insulin do that? Insulin is the most anabolic hormone in the human body, which means it's a growth hormone. It is the storage hormone in the human body. So your body, you ingest carbohydrates, those carbohydrates get converted into glucose, your blood sugar levels rise, or your blood glucose levels rise. Your body secretes this insulin, and this insulin goes, take that glucose in the blood and drive it into muscle cells. Store it as glycogen. Store. Get it out of the bloodstream. Make sure that I don't go into effectively what we're going to call hyperglycemia. So where your blood sugar levels just continue to rise out of control. So your body secretes insulin, this anabolic storage hormone, to control your blood sugar levels. That's the primary thing you have to understand. It's the primary hormone response when it comes to carbohydrates. Now, a couple of things with insulin that are going to become very relevant in the next part of the video when we talk about timing of carbohydrates is when insulin levels rise. So when your pancreas secretes insulin, your insulin goes up. Insulin blocks the release of cortisol. Now, cortisol is another hormone. It's the primary stress hormone in the human body, and cortisol is incredibly catabolic, which means it's a breakdown hormone. So your body tends to release cortisol when you're stressed, when you're tired, and when you're putting your body through a lot of physical exertion as well. Your body will secrete cortisol, catabolic breakdown hormone. When insulin levels are high, when insulin levels come up, it blocks the release of cortisol. So cortisol levels your body will try and release cortisol, can't do it. So ingest carbohydrates, insulin goes up, cortisol goes down or isn't released at all. That's really the main hormone relationship that you need to understand when it comes to ingesting carbohydrates as well. Now with insulin, when your body secretes insulin, if you remember what I just said, is a storage hormone, right? So it tells your body to store whatever it is that's floating around in your bloodstream, in particular glucose or blood sugar. It tells your body to store that. Now, the kind of co-side of that, or the other side of that, is when you're telling your body, when insulin is telling your body to store, your body cannot burn body fat for energy. It just won't do it. You can't burn body fat for energy when your insulin levels are high. So when we get just into the last part of the video where we talk about cutting and carbohydrate intake, obviously if you're trying to burn body fat for energy, you're trying to cut down body fat, you want to keep your insulin levels as low as possible or as steady as possible throughout the day, so that you don't have this insulin stopping or preventing your body from burning that body fat for energy. So just a quick summary: insulin, most anabolic hormone in the human body, storage hormone. Whenever you ingest carbohydrates, you get insulin response. Insulin is secreted, brings your blood sugar back down by storing glycogen, by storing glucose as glycogen in your muscle tissues and your liver. Most anabolic hormone in the human body, prevents the release of cortisol, but doesn't allow your body to burn body fat for energy. So that's the main kind of foundation of hormone response when it comes to ingesting carbohydrates. Now, if you just think really quickly back to the first part of this video where I said glycemic index, simple carbs are high GI, complex carbs are low GI. Obviously, the higher the glycemic index, so the faster that the carbohydrates are being converted into energy, the bigger insulin response you're gonna get. So you tend to get a much bigger insulin response, or what we call an insulin spike, with simple high GI carbohydrates than you do with complex low GI carbohydrates. Simply because your body doesn't need to secrete as much insulin, because there's not as much blood sugar being rushed around your body from those carbohydrates you've just ingested. So simple high GI carbs, great insulin response or insulin spike. Complex low GI carbs, very small or significantly lower insulin response. Your body still does secrete insulin, but it won't spike, and it's not the same degree of response of insulin or secretion of insulin as you get with simple high GI carbohydrates. So that's hormone response. Now, let's put all of this foundational knowledge, all of these knowledge bombs into action, and tell you exactly how to apply this to your daily diet, to your macronutrient intake, to your carbohydrate intake. So the times when you want to have carbohydrates, if you think back to what your body uses carbohydrates for, converts them into glucose, burns the glucose as energy, stores glucose as glycogen for energy later on, converts the glycogen into triglycerides and stores it as body fat. So the times when you want to consume carbohydrates, obviously, times when you need A, energy, B, to replenish glycogen levels or replenish those stored glucose levels, and 3, you don't want to consume carbohydrates when there's no use for energy. Your glycogen levels are full because your body will store them as fat. So that's when you don't want to consume carbohydrates. So keeping that in mind, the first time you want to consume carbs is as soon as you get up in the morning, man. You've just been sleeping for 6 to 8 hours. It's been 6 to 12 hours since your last meal. Your body has been keeping you alive by burning into glycogen levels, by burning into muscle glycogen, burning into liver glycogen, just to supply energy to your body, because you haven't been consuming carbohydrates to give your body energy. So just keeping you alive, your body has depleted your glycogen levels in the muscle tissue and in your liver. So having carbohydrates first thing in the morning really addresses point 2 of what your body uses carbs for, and that is glycogen replenishment. So really replenishing the muscle glycogen, the liver glycogen. So you want to get carbs first thing in the morning. Ideally, you want those carbs to be complex, low GI carbohydrates, because there's no need for insulin response first thing in the morning. You're just trying to replenish the glycogen levels. So first time you want to consume carbs, first thing in the morning with your first meal of the day, ideally complex low GI carbohydrates. So a fantastic idea is like a wholemeal, whole grain bread, or say some oats, man, something like that, you know, some rice. If you do rice in the mornings is fantastic as well. So complex low GI carb first thing in the morning replaces glycogen. The second time you want to consume carbohydrates is with your pre-workout meal. Now, obviously, your body uses carbohydrates for energy. Pre-workout, you want to consume carbohydrates so that you've got glucose in your bloodstream, ready to be burnt for energy when you train. So pre-workout, you also want to consume carbohydrates. Here, you can get a blend of like a high GI and a low GI carbohydrate. I personally, as a personal preference, I personally like to consume complex low GI carbs in my pre-workout meal as well. So I will consume like a sweet potato, some brown rice, sometimes some bread, not very often, but usually sweet potato and brown rice as a complex low GI carbohydrate that's going to convert into glucose in my bloodstream, into blood sugar in my bloodstream quite slowly, and give me that long lasting energy stream for during my workout, for while I'm training. So pre-workout, once again, low GI complex carbohydrates if possible in your pre-workout meal. And next time you want to consume carbohydrates is during the workout, is intra-workout. Now this is not so much about giving your body something to use for energy, because you've just done that with your pre-workout meal. It's not about replacing glycogen, because you've just done that also with your breakfast meal. Intra-workout is really about insulin response, man. It's really about using carbohydrates as a tool to raise insulin levels so that your body can't secrete cortisol during your workout. So your body cannot secrete the stress hormone during your workout. So it's really about manipulating insulin so that you can be as anabolic as you possibly can for as long as you possibly can during your workout. So your intra-workout carbohydrates, this is where we tend to recommend a simple high GI carbohydrate, or there are some really cool carbohydrates on the market at the moment. A really good one is Carbohydrate that I use myself, and it just has a really interesting insulin response. So it gives you kind of like a longer lasting insulin response during your workout, which means your body's not going to be able to secrete cortisol for longer. So intra-workout carbohydrate intake is really just about manipulating insulin response. So insulin levels go up, cortisol levels go down, you stay as anabolic as you possibly can throughout your entire workout. The last time you want to consume carbohydrates is post-workout. Now, post-workout is really about two things. So it's obviously not about energy because you've just finished your workout. It is about glycogen replenishment. So it's about making sure that your muscle glycogen, your liver glycogen is completely full, which if you've been consuming carbohydrates intra-workout, it probably is, but it's just about topping that up, making sure it's completely full. And then once again, it's about taking advantage of insulin response. So post-workout, you definitely want to get yourself simple high GI carbohydrates, that if possible, the most simple, highest GI carbohydrate you can possibly get, aka dextrose or D-glucose. Get that in post-workout, and that is going to give you supreme insulin response. It's going to give you an insulin spike. And in post-workout, man, if you're having your post-workout shake, you're having your creatine, you're having your glutamine, if you remember what I said about insulin at the start of this video, insulin is the most anabolic hormone in the human body. It's a storage hormone. You get those simple carbs in post-workout, insulin levels go up, you get an insulin spike, storage hormone levels go up, and your body goes, take that protein, take that creatine, take that glutamine, take all those amino acids that I just consumed, drive them into muscle cells, man. Drive them into muscle cells and store them there. And that is exactly where you want your proteins, your amino acids post-workout to start the recovery process. So post-workout, the simplest, highest GI carbohydrate you can possibly get, and this is about glycogen replenishment, and it's about, once again, manipulating insulin response, getting that hormone response for storage of amino acids. Those are the four main times you want to consume carbohydrates to manipulate either hormones or to take advantage of what your body uses carbohydrates for. Now, real quick, just going to round this video off real quick with a little touch on bulking carbohydrates, cutting carbohydrates. So let's start with bulking real quick. Look, when you're trying to bulk, you gotta remember that carbohydrates are your primary source of energy. And if you do not consume enough carbohydrates in any 24-hour period, and your body requires energy, your body will start to convert protein or amino acids into glucose through gluconeogenesis and convert that protein, burn that protein or the glucose that's converted from the protein as energy. Now, if you know anything about anything and you've been in this industry, you will know that protein is much more expensive than carbohydrates to buy and consume. Everybody knows that, man. A tub of protein powder costs you $100, tub of carbohydrates twice the size costs you $40. Man, it's like 4, 5, sometimes even 10 times as expensive as carbs. So when you're trying to bulk, make sure that the bulk of your energy requirements within any 24-hour period is coming from carbohydrates. It's just gonna save you a lot of money, man, because you know you don't want to be in the case where you're converting like 1,000 grams of protein per day, 0 carbs because you read something in an article that says carbs get stored as fat and you don't want to put on fat in the off season, and you're paying 10 times as much for what essentially your body's going to convert into carbohydrates and burn for energy anyway. Do not do that. So when it comes to bulking, do those 4 things of where you consume carbohydrates. So first thing in the morning, pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout. Do those 4 things and then add carbohydrates to your other meals to help put you in a calorie surplus. Look, if you haven't seen the Bulking Bible, episode 1 of MJ's Thoughts, you would have no idea what a calorie surplus is. Pause this video now, man. Go watch that video. That's really going to give you the fundamentals of bulking and teach you how to bulk. And then what I said about calorie surplus is going to make all kinds of sense to you, man. So when it comes to bulking and carbohydrates, breakfast, pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout, and then any other time during the day that you need carbohydrates to help just make sure that you're satisfying your energy needs for any 24-hour period. So you've got the protein left over to build muscle with, none of it's being converted back into glucose and become a very expensive energy source. That's the main thing with bulking. Once again, with bulking as well, just another small thing is you're not too concerned about, we shouldn't be too concerned about burning body fat. So you should be taking advantage of insulin response every opportunity you can. So your during workout insulin response with your carbs, absolutely. Your post-workout insulin spike with those simple high GI carbs to help with storage of protein, creatine, glutamine, all your amino acids, absolutely. Please, carbohydrates are so important when it's bulking, man. So important. Do not get scared off by carbohydrates when you're bulking. Just don't do it. Please don't do it, else you're just not gonna reach your goals. That's bulking. Real quick touch on cutting. Now, the episode of MJ's Thoughts, which we're gonna be calling the Cutting Chronicles, has not yet been released. It will be released and it will have a lot in there on carbohydrate timing. So just real quickly, as a little bit of a segue to the Cutting Chronicles, man, when you're cutting, you really need to, now that I've given you the knowledge of hormone response and what your body does with insulin, the fact that insulin doesn't allow your body to burn body fat for energy, you have to be very, very careful with when you secrete insulin or when you consume, in other words, when you consume high GI simple carbohydrates. When you're cutting, man, really the only time that you should be consuming high GI simple carbs is during your workout, if at all. If at all. So if you go back to what I said, where I said the times you should be consuming carbs, you should, when you're cutting, definitely breakfast, low GI, complex carbohydrates for glycogen replenishment. Definitely pre-workout, because you need to give yourself something to burn for energy during your workout, so you're going to lose muscle mass. Definitely intra-workout, your simple high GI carbohydrates for insulin response, so that your body can't secrete the cortisol during your workout, helps keep you anabolic, helps you maintain muscle mass while you're trying to burn body fat off. The post-workout thing, skip it, man, skip it. You do not need insulin response post-workout when you're cutting, because all it's going to do is make it more difficult for your body to burn body fat off. So when you're cutting, breakfast, pre-workout, intra-workout, that's pretty much it. You don't need carbs at any other time. Of course, when we go through Cutting Chronicles, we're going to talk about calorie deficit and how much of a calorie deficit you should be in, and then the whole carbohydrate thing will make a whole lot more sense. But just as a segue into the Cutting Chronicles, when you're trying to cut breakfast, pre-workout, intra-workout. That's pretty much it. The only time you should be having simple high GI carbs is intra-workout, because at all other times during the day, you want your insulin response, your insulin levels to be as low as possible so that your body is able to burn as much body fat for energy as it possibly can. Guys, that is episode 2 of MassiveJoes' thoughts on carbohydrates. Look, we've been through types of carbs, uses of carbs, hormone response, carbohydrate timing, and a little bit on bulking and cutting. I really hope that once you've seen this video at this point, man, you have a much better understanding of carbohydrates. Look, I know some of the things in here were a little bit complicated. This is the beautiful thing about YouTube, man. This is why we're shooting these videos, because you can press pause, you can press rewind, you can play, you can watch it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 100 times, and really go through every word that I've said and make sure that you understand everything I was saying. Look, if you didn't understand anything, or if you need me to elaborate on anything at all, the best way to do it, as I said in episode 1 of MJ's Thoughts, man, the best way to do it is to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're gonna put a button on the screen right now that you can click that'll allow you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Once you've done that, you can comment to this video. Please put your comments there. Obviously, we're gonna put this video on MassiveJoes.com. It's gonna go on our Facebook page as well. If you comment there, only people that visit it in that location can see the comment. If you comment on YouTube as a subscribed user, man, everyone can see your comments, and then everyone can see my response. So knowledge bombs get dropped all around. So guys, please hit the subscribe button, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you got any questions, drop them as a comment to the YouTube video. Don't drop them as a comment to the Facebook post. Don't drop them as a comment to anything we've done on the website. Drop it as a comment to the YouTube video. Guys, thank you very much for watching episode 2 of MJ's Thoughts on Carbohydrates. I hope that I have armed you with the knowledge bombs that you need to harness the power of carbohydrates, whether you're bulking or cutting. You now understand them, you know when to have them, you know the insulin response associated with them. Use them to your advantage and help you make all kinds of gains, or if you're cutting, help you maintain the gains, man. Guys, that is MassiveJoes' Thoughts, episode 2, carbohydrates, and I'm coming to you from MassiveJoes.com. Stay massive.
The bench press, or the classic barbell bench press, my bench has been a bit stale the last few weeks, so I thought I'd mix it up.
Always good to mix it up, man. When you find exercise not working for you, your strength starts to plateau, mix that stuff up.
But so here we are with our fourth working set, 60 kilo dumbbells.